Fantasy is packed to the brim with unpredictable mechanics that defy expectations at every turn. But today, I've set my sights on status effects, because Final Fantasy definitely has some weird ones. For starters, the Transfiguration statuses, the status effects that transform your characters into weird and wacky things. The first one, which I think many of you are already aware of, is the Toad status. Toad originated in Final Fantasy III and disabled almost all spells, the exception being the Toad spell itself. And in fact, the Toad spell was mandatory to complete the game. Your characters need to transform into toads to access several mandatory locations, but the status effects only get wackier from there. Final Fantasy IV introduced the second Transfiguration spell, Pig. And when a character transforms into a pig, they also lose access to commands, but not all of them. Magic becomes uncastable, and the kick, bluff, and cry commands also become unavailable, among others. But if you're not a mage, being a pig can actually be a blessing. When afflicted by the pig status, most status effects cannot be afflicted upon the character. But oddly, there are 3 exceptions: float, poison, and gradual petrify. I'm not sure why these exceptions exist, but ultimately the pig status effect actually upgrades your non-mages, making them far more durable. And best of all, your piggy characters are also invulnerable to the toad status, which is a far worse fate. But things get even weirder in the next installment. Final Fantasy V introduced another weird status effect called Old. I don't know that I consider this to be a true transformation, but it does affect the appearance of the characters, turning their hair gray. But in terms of gameplay, while afflicted with the Old status, characters' attributes, with the exception of health and magic points, slowly deteriorate, and eventually those stats will reach a value of 1. And you might be tempted to just cure the Old status. Not a bad instinct, since obviously you don't want your stats to go to 1. But here's the problem. After curing the status, the already afflicted stat drops don't go away until the end of the battle. And even weirder, many bosses in the game are vulnerable to the Old status, which you can use to completely neuter them. And the transformations get even weirder. The Imp status in Final Fantasy VI transforms a character into a green imp, and this status can be pretty awful. It reduces attack power to 0, removes the ability of armor and weapons to influence damage, and disables all magic except the Imp spell. And while this does seem awful, because it is, the Imp status does have one distinct advantage. Imps can use the Imp equipment, namely the Imp halberd, the tortoise shield, the titanium, and the Imp armor. And this equipment is completely broken. The Imp halberd has an attack stat of 253. And just for context, this is enormous and only exceeded by the 3 best weapons in the game: Ragnarok, Lightbringer, and Ultima Weapon. And the armor maxes out a character's defenses, making them pretty much invincible. And even better, because the Imp halberd is a spear, it gets a huge attack boost if a character uses the jump command. This makes any Imp technically the best physical attacker in the game, which is crazy considering it's a bad status effect. But this isn't even the weirdest status effect. In Final Fantasy Tactics, there is an incredible transfiguration that completely breaks the game: Chicken. And this status can only be afflicted in one way. If a character's brave drops below 10, they immediately become a chicken. And if you can turn an enemy into a chicken, you've got it made. So here's the not so weird stuff about chickens. They are cowards. The only thing a chicken will do is run away. Chickens are also weak. Anyone battling a chicken gets a huge bonus to their attack power. But here's where it starts getting weird. Chickens are short kings. Many tactics attacks are dependent on height. And normally, if you're 3 units or less above a character, you can physically attack them. But if your target is a chicken, that might not work. Chickens are effectively 1 unit shorter than everyone else, so you need to be at a relatively lower height yourself to strike them. And one more thing, tiny chickens are more vulnerable to thievery. The chicken status, as well as the frog status coincidentally, makes stealing more likely to succeed. Lore-wise, I like to imagine that the shrunken chicken slipped out of its clothing and is now just dragging it around, and you're just plucking it off the ground behind them. But now that we've talked about a bunch of negative status effects, let's swing back and talk about some weird positive status effects. Final Fantasy Tactics is the source of several weird status effects in the series, so I have to talk about another one. One of my personal favorites, Atheist, also known as Innocent in the original PS1 version. But before I can talk about this status, let's quickly talk about the faith mechanic in Final Fantasy Tactics. This is one of the weirdest mechanics in the series as well, and I plan to make an entire video about weird mechanics in addition to this one. So make sure you like this video if you want to see that. The faith statistic, which ranges from 0 to 100, determines determines how effective magic is. A character with high faith both deals and receives higher damage from magic. They also have a higher probability of status effect spells connecting, and they also have a higher chance of being successfully revived by a spell. Low faith does exactly the opposite, and the Atheist status just drops your faith to 0. But what happens if your faith is 0? Well, the character is completely unaffected by all magic in the game. They won't take damage from magic attacks, the spells they cast will do 0 damage, they can't heal or be healed by magic, and magic cannot revive them. And there are only 4 ways to place this status on a unit. First, the robotic units Mobile Construct 7 and 8 have a permanent Atheist status, because robots don't believe in Jesus. Period. The second and third way are spells. Beowulf's Doubt spell and Mystic's Disbelief, also known as Doubt Faith in the original. And the third is by attacking an enemy with a specific weapon, the Goku pole. Unfortunately, this pole is purchasable, so if you want to try out this status effect for yourself, I encourage you to go buy it. If you're playing the remake, it's at the Orbonne Monastery. But what's even more interesting to me than the effect itself is that Atheist is technically a negative status effect. However, depending on how your team is built, this status effect could actually be a huge boon to your team. The magic units in Final Fantasy Tactics, specifically the Black Mages, have a nasty habit of destroying your entire team with one spell. But with the Atheist status effect, they're rendered completely impotent. That means you only have to deal with the Brawlers and Boppers. So if you build a team that's based around physical attacks and use items only to heal, you could very easily mow down the opposition. Perhaps it's not the most effective strategy, but I feel that it's pretty gosh darn neat. One of the more famous positive status effects, all Lucky 7s can completely break Final Fantasy VII. If at any point an action causes a character to have exactly 7,777 HP, the character is immediately afflicted with the Lucky 7 status. And this status does 2 things. First, the character afflicted with this status immediately deals 64 attacks to random enemies, and all of those hits will deal 7,777 damage, for a total of about 500,000 damage. And once that's done, any attack your character hits an enemy with will deal 7,777 damage until that character's HP changes. But the activation criteria for Lucky 7 seems kind of specific, right? How are you going to get your health to 7,777? Well, the easiest way is to just attack yourself in a weak enemy battle until your health total ends in 77. Then use a combination of potions to raise your health to 7,677 before the next battle. Then finally enter a battle and use a potion on your character to raise their health by 100, activating Lucky 7s. And here's the reason this status is so broken. The bulkiest super boss in the game, Emerald Weapon, has 1 million health. An Emerald Weapon has an ability, Air Tam Storm, that deals 1,111 damage for each materia a character has equipped. That means if you use HP plus materia to get your health to 9,999 and make sure you only have 2 equipped, you can guarantee that Air Tam Storm will lower your health to 7,777. And this can actually happen for all 3 characters in battle if you set it up in advance, allowing you to blitz through this boss without taking a single action on your own. And while this status effect is broken because of its intended effect, Final Fantasy VI has a status effect that is broken because of a glitch. The invisible status effect in Final Fantasy VI is quite useful. This status prevents all physical attacks from hitting the user, but being affected by any spell removes the effect. And interestingly, it has a couple of hidden mechanics that the game does not elaborate. A character with a vanish status will always be hit by the cat. Why are you up here? I'm trying to record a video. The most well-known effect is that the character with the vanish status will always be hit by the Doom spell, which causes instant death, even if they are immune to death. But less well-known, vanish prevents the user from activating their desperation attack, a powerful attack that can activate when a character is at low health. But that's not all, because it also prevents the character from evading magic, which is the source of the original glitch I talked about, the Doom glitch. All magic spells will hit the character no matter what. And it has one final effect. A character with a vanish status receives no benefit from Reflect or Shell. And I do think that this makes sense. It balances the status, making sure that whatever hits you can do some big PP damage while still removing the status. Which reminds me that if you love doing big PP damage, hit the subscribe button, because it helps my channel and lets me know that you hate terrible transitions, like this one into the next status effect. Final Fantasy IX has 3 statuses that are pretty neat and unique to the series, and the first is Venom. Now, if you weren't paying attention, you might think that this is Poison, the status that simply drains your health over time, but Venom is actually far worse. First, Venom also drains magic points, which isn't too bad, but is kind of the cherry on top of the second awful thing this status does. It completely prevents a character from acting, similar to Stop. And the character also no longer counts as being alive. So if you don't heal this status and everyone else goes down, it's an immediate game over. And it's a game over for your experience gain if your character gets afflicted with the virus status, which does exactly what I just implied it does. It prevents your character from gaining experience and ability points. And while this can be really annoying if you're grinding, it was actually the most helpful status in the entire game when I beat Final Fantasy IX at level 1, a video that I will link in the description-do. But there's one more weird status effect in this game, arguably the weirdest in the entire series: Trouble. Any damage taken by a character afflicted by trouble becomes big trouble for the other characters in the party. The afflicted character still takes normal damage, but everyone else also takes that damage. Well, half of it anyway. And I don't understand why this status exists or how it makes sense, but that doesn't change the fact that it's super neat. Follow me on the social media sites that I'm flashing on the screen right now, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.